Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Dr. Milo Wolfe, protein recommendations, and what it means for you. Before I get into this topic, if you guys need coaching, check out the link down below. Coaching is what I do for a living. I would love to help. All right. Over on Instagram, Dr. Milo Wolfe had a short, I believe it was, or a reel that was talking about protein intake. There is a recent study that was referenced when it comes to protein intake. There's a lot of chatter right now on this. I wanted to sort through this and help you guys understand how much protein is reasonable, how to interpret this study, and if it is calling for you to use extreme amounts of protein or basically what we're doing right now with protein intake. So first, I'm going to get into the study, and after the study, you can see here, I'm going to get into a list of 5 things to consider when you're trying to figure out your protein intake. So let's take a look at the study first. You can see the PubMed ideas at the top for any of you that want to research it. Here is a quote: dose-response relationship between protein intake and muscle mass increase, a systemic review and meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. Basically, we're investigating how varying levels of protein will impact lean body mass and muscle mass development. Now, here are the key findings: protein intake and lean body mass gains. This is what we're after: gains, muscle gains. The analysis revealed a dose-dependent relationship between protein intake and increases in lean body mass. So it showed basically there's a relationship between eating more protein and getting more results out of your gym efforts. Specifically, for each additional 0.1 grams per kilo of body weight per day of protein consumed, there was an average lean body mass increase of 0.39 kilos. Now, it went on to say above this threshold, the lean body mass gain per 0.1 gram per kilo per day increment was 0.12. The study found that the combination of increased protein intake and resistance training led to more significant lean body mass gains compared to increased protein intake alone. Obviously, you need to have resistance training. You can't just eat protein or additional protein and build muscle mass. So let's unpack this. What does this mean? On the surface, we're kind of getting the impression just by reading this, if we don't come through it, that more. We want to eat more protein. Now, I want to talk really quick about practical limitations. There are diminishing returns. The study indicates that beyond a protein intake of 1.3 grams per kilo per day, the incremental gains in lean body mass decrease. So basically, the study said once you get to about 1.3 grams per kilo per day, the incremental gains decrease. That doesn't mean they weren't important. That doesn't mean that there wasn't a slight benefit, but we need to know that after 1.3, they started to diminish. Now, obviously, there's individual variability involved here: age, sex, baseline muscle mass, etc. All these can play a role. The study duration, analyzed trials were varied in length, and long-term effects of high protein intake were not extensively covered, leaving questions about sustainability and long-term health impacts. This is just a random caveat, obviously, against some of those that fear higher protein intake. Now, we need to take some time to understand what this study is saying. 1.3 grams per kilo of body weight really isn't a lot of protein. It's extremely low and fairly unbalanced when you consider what the average lifter is doing right now and the number of calories the average lifter, male or female, is taking in. Underweight lifters, or kind of skinny lifters, or hard gainers, 1.3 grams per kilo might be slightly under and very unbalanced, even for reasonable metabolism. We're not talking about lifters with super high metabolisms. Even those lifters with moderate or even slow metabolisms, 1.3 grams per kilo is going to be on the low side. A 160-pound lifter, and this is kind of even the higher end for the skinny guys, is about 75 kilos, and you multiply 1.3 here, and you can see here you're going to have a very low amount of protein per day, barely above 100 grams. Now, for an overweight guy, let's say you're an overweight guy, you're 250 pounds, and you want to know how much protein you should intake, And this study says 1.3 and more is a little bit better, so you want to rush out and eat a little bit more. Is it really telling you to eat more than normal or an unreasonable level? So a 250-pound lifter would weigh about 113 kilos. 113 kilos times 1.3 is basically a minimum of 150 grams of protein a day, which is what I consider to be a red line or bare minimum for muscle growth. So you can see here as you unpack this study that 1.3 really isn't a lot. In fact, it's pretty much on the low end. So when influencers like Dr. Milo, Wolfe, or anybody else interpreting this study is telling you, you probably need to eat more protein, let's take some time and unpack that and figure out what exactly that means and how it compares to what I've been advocating and what the average bodybuilder has been eating over the last 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. If you look at a 90-kilo man or somebody that's about 200 pounds, at 1.6, so we're going to bump it up a little bit, 1.6 grams per kilo would still be only 144 grams of protein. That's a little bit low. If you're in this range, 2.0 is a lot more reasonable, and a high end of 2.6 would yield about 234 daily grams. So when these influencers start to talk about 3 grams per kilo of body weight, you can see that's a little bit on the high end, what I would consider getting into the excessive levels. Basically, you can see from this, if you're sticking around 2.0 to 2.6 grams per kilo of body weight, you're probably in a pretty reasonable place. So basically, if you compare this to what the study was saying, that at about 1.3 grams per kilo, the results kind of diminish. You can see 1.3 really isn't a lot. And the average musclehead or bodybuilder is well above that to begin with. So my basic take-home advice is to stick between 2 to 2.6 grams per kilo of body weight. I'm going to give you a little bit more on the specific end of where you should be. I'm going to give you a few more guidelines when it comes to determining your protein intake. So let's take a look at those. Now, here are 5 things to consider when determining your protein intake. Number 1, relax. Despite the hype, despite the study, it's not telling you to gorge yourself or take in excessive amounts of protein. Understand that in the long run, a reasonable protein intake applied with consistent training will be all you need. And basically, this study is giving you a reasonable protein intake for muscle building. Consistency, hard training, progressive overload, and focused bulking will always be the true keys. And when you stack them side by side with a reasonable protein intake, you're in a good place. Make protein a focal point of your diet, but don't feel compelled to overconsume, like at the top end of 3.0 grams per kilo of body weight. That's getting a little bit excessive. It's getting a little bit ridiculous, and it's going to become a burden for you when you try to get this in on a daily basis. Understand the body isn't that fragile and things even out in the long run. So staying between a range of like 2.0 and 2.6 is very reasonable. You don't have to panic. The body isn't that fragile. You don't have to count macros if you don't want. As long as you're in that range, you're going to be fine. All right, number 2, set red lines. What does this mean? Set minimums. This is something I talk about with my clients. Set a bare minimum red line of 150 grams per day. Better yet, aim for a range of around 170 to 200 grams of protein per day. That's going to be well within the information presented in this study. Basically, what the red line means, you should not go below this level. If you are, your diet is probably a little bit unbalanced. You're probably leaning on fast food or junk food or crap food too much. So try not to go below 150 grams per day. Women set a bare minimum red line of 110 grams per day. Better yet, aim for a range of 130 to 180. Bottom line, understand the body isn't fragile and that having ultimate precision isn't a long-run requirement. These targets will put you well within a beneficial protein intake range. Number 3, I want you guys to see and remember the big picture. Studies can often induce fear. We can easily pick up the belief or the fear that the body is fragile and that if we aren't super precise, things will fall apart with the muscle building process. And this is absolutely untrue. See the big picture. We have 70 years of solid bodybuilding history, Over the course of a lifting career, excessive amounts, trying to reach 3.0 grams per kilo of body weight, have never been needed to achieve quality physiques. This study isn't telling you you need it. The study isn't telling you to be excessive, and the key word here is excessive. The study basically said 1.3 grams per kilo. Above that, you can find some benefit, and you can see as long as you're balanced and reasonable, you're well above that level already. This study basically advocates reasonable muscle building protein intake. I also want you guys, when you're trying to figure out your protein intake, to consider balance. You want to look at your metabolism. How many calories are you eating per day right now? If you're trying to cut weight, aim for at least 35% of your daily calories from protein. This will help you with food volume. It'll help you rely on lean protein sources. You'll get more satiety. You'll feel more full. This is a really good target for anyone that's trying to cut weight. 40 is a little bit better, but try to get a minimum of 35%. Now, if you're trying to build muscle or maintain, aim for at least 30% of your daily calories from protein. This will provide you with a good red line or a good minimum and a good balanced starting point. And it'll put you well within the parameters of what we found in this study or meta-analysis. And finally, use the mantra, a little more. A little more protein is almost always better than a little less. Animal-based protein sources are rich in nutrients. That's a big key here. Beyond muscle building, animal-based sources are rich in nutrients. So that is obviously good for overall health. It's something to keep in mind when you're eating for overall health. Animal-based protein sources help with recovery and repair. They provide satiety, help you feel full, and they help us keep focused on health and away from junkier food choices. You also get the benefit of a minor TEF boost, which is a thermic effect of food. Basically, when digesting these choices, it'll burn a few more calories. So the bottom line here, guys, is this study isn't anything new. It's not anything groundbreaking. It's not anything crazy. You basically want to land a little bit higher on the protein intake scale than the average Joe or Jane in public would be doing. And most of us in the bodybuilding lifestyle are there already. We talk about 1.3 grams per kilo of body weight. That's on the low end. That's on the super low end. This is the kind of stuff pushed by people outside of the fitness and health industries as kind of a more normalish protein intake. And some in this area kind of live in a land of fear when it comes to animal-based protein foods. In the bodybuilding and muscle building world, we're already well above 1.6 grams per kilo of body weight. Most of us are already in 2 to 2.6. Just a final note, this is a good place to be. This is a healthy and balanced place to be. You don't have to go up to 3.0 grams per kilo of body weight. That's a little bit excessive. Just try to enjoy your protein intake. Pick choices that you like, and don't panic, relax. In the long run, if you train hard, if you keep a quality focused bulk, if you focus on sustainable training and consistency, you will be fine and you will build all the muscle you need. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day.